A review of Joan Evans. Get Your Shit Together Now. Contingency Life Planning. The blunt title of Joan Evans's Get Your Shit Together Now may suggest an irreverent self-help manual, but the book itself is a serious, unusually comprehensive argument for accepting responsibility for the practical and emotional consequences of aging. Evans asks readers to prepare not merely for death, but for the much broader range of events that can precede it. Illness, incapacity, dementia, job loss, divorce, bereavement, housing transitions, long-term care, and financial disruption. Her central proposition is simple and persuasive. The worst time to make complicated decisions is in the middle of a crisis. Evans calls her approach contingency life planning. The term is important because it distinguishes her project from conventional estate planning. It deals principally with what happens after death. A contingency life plan addresses what may happen while a person is still alive but unable to communicate, manage finances, remain at home, care for a pet, locate records, or direct medical treatment. The author's model therefore encompasses legal documents, healthcare information, finances, insurance, housing, long-term care, funeral preferences, digital access, family records, and the designation of personal and professional advisors. This breadth is the book's greatest strength. Many books on aging concentrate on one dimension of later life. Atul Gawande's Being Mortal, for example, examines the limitations of modern medicine and the importance of preserving autonomy and meaning near the end of life. Katie Butler's The Art of Dying, while similarly emphasizes aging in place, candid conversations with physicians, and the choices that can make a good death more likely. Evans shares their insistence that individuals should not surrender all authority to medical institutions, but she is less interested in philosophical or clinical narrative than in implementation. Her characteristic question is not only what kind of life or death do you want, but where are the documents, who has the keys, who should be called, and what instructions have you left? In this respect, the book also invites comparison with Margareta Magnusson's The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. Magnusson encourages people to reduce the possessions and disorder that survivors will inherit. Evans expands that principle from the household closet to the whole administrative structure of a life. Her version of death cleaning includes trusts, insurance policies, tax records, passwords, medical directives, property deeds, military records, family archives, pet care instructions, and farewell letters. The objective is not tidiness for its own sake. It is an act of consideration toward those who may otherwise be forced to reconstruct a life while grieving. The book's argument is strengthened by Evans's professional background. A retired Army lieutenant colonel, program analyst, human capital specialist, and Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, she approaches aging as a problem of readiness, coordination, risk reduction, and process improvement. She explains that military service taught her to anticipate worst-case scenarios and remain prepared for unexpected events. That perspective gives the book its distinctive voice. Evans does not romanticize improvisation. A family should not have to determine a parent's wishes, find an attorney, compare rehabilitation facilities, locate passwords, and decipher financial accounts during the same week. The military and managerial framework could have produced an impersonal handbook. Instead, Evans repeatedly connects organization with human relationships. She urges readers to identify a support team before trouble arises and to assign responsibilities rather than assuming that the family will somehow manage everything. She recognizes that unpaid relatives provide much of America's caregiving and that the number of available caregivers relative to older adults is declining. Her argument is persuasive because it exposes a common contradiction. People who say they do not wish to burden their families often leave those families without the information necessary to help them. Evans also places her work in the tradition of Stephen Covey's injunction to begin with the end in mind. Covey applies that principle to effectiveness, personal mission, and long-term achievement. Evans gives it a deliberately literal interpretation. The end is death, and responsible living requires acknowledging it. Yet the book is not fundamentally morbid. Its structure moves from mortality and emergency preparation toward purpose, routine, retirement, volunteering, education, travel, companionship, family, and pets. Covey's model joins effectiveness to physical, mental, social, and spiritual renewal. Evans similarly argues that practical readiness should free a person to live more deliberately. That movement from preparation to purpose also recalls Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which Evans names among her aging resources. She does not attempt Frankl's depth of philosophical or psychological inquiry. Rather, she translates the proposition that life requires meaning into the practical language of goals, service, relationships, and daily schedules. Once the reader has dealt with the administrative and emotionally taxing work of contingency planning, Evans turns toward the question of what success in later life should mean. Her most persuasive insight is that planning for death and planning for life are not opposing activities. The former can create the freedom, clarity, and peace of mind necessary for the latter. The centerpiece of the book is Appendix A, which turns the argument into a usable system. Evans proposes a physical and electronic contingency life plan containing a letter of instruction, immediate medical information, healthcare directives, burial preferences, contact lists, account access instructions, financial statements, wills, trusts, powers of attorney, insurance records, identification, deeds, employment history, family archives, tax information, and pet instructions. The level of detail is formidable, but that is precisely its value. The appendix transforms good intentions into a sequence of tasks that can be completed, reviewed, and updated. Evans recommends assembling the plan in a conspicuous binder, scanning completed documents, storing originals securely, distributing electronic copies to appropriate family members and advisors, and reviewing the material periodically. This practical apparatus distinguishes the book from works that merely encourage readers to have the conversation. Evans supplies the agenda for that conversation and the forms needed to preserve its results. The same comprehensiveness occasionally becomes a limitation. The long directories of agencies, websites, benefits, medical programs, and financial resources can interrupt the narrative momentum. Some sections read more like a reference manual than a conventional work of nonfiction. Because laws, tax thresholds, government benefits, telephone numbers, and web addresses change, future editions will require regular revision. Readers should also understand that the book is a planning guide rather than a substitute for individualized legal, financial, or medical advice, an important distinction that Evans herself generally acknowledges. Her tone may also divide readers. The repeated use of shit gives the book urgency and approachability, but it sometimes sits uneasily beside discussions of terminal illness, religion, taxation, and bereavement. Some readers will appreciate its refusal to speak in euphemisms. Others may find the title less inviting than the thoughtful book beneath it. Likewise, Evans's explicitly Christian assertions may reassure readers who share her faith, but may seem more categorical than necessary in a book intended for a broad audience. The underlying argument about spiritual preparation, community, and meaning would remain compelling if framed more inclusively. These reservations do not weaken the essential persuasiveness of the work. Evans understands that procrastination surrounding aging is seldom caused by a lack of awareness. Most adults know they should prepare a will, discuss medical preferences, organize their finances, and tell someone where important records are kept. What they lack is a comprehensive structure and a forceful reason to begin. Get Your Shit Together Now provides both. The book is especially valuable for adults approaching retirement, military veterans navigating the Department of Veterans Affairs, people caring for aging parents, and families in which one person has traditionally controlled all financial or household information. Its broader audience, however, is anyone whose incapacity would require another person to step suddenly into an unfamiliar life. Evans's final message is neither that death can be controlled, nor that every crisis can be expected. It is that avoidable confusion can be reduced. Documents can be assembled. Wishes can be expressed. Responsibilities can be assigned. Families can be spared unnecessary expense, conflict, and uncertainty. Having addressed those obligations, readers can return to the more affirmative work of living, forming relationships, learning, serving, traveling, and choosing how their remaining time will be spent. The book's closing contrast, Thrive versus Just Survive, accurately summarizes its governing argument. Get Your Shit Together Now earns its provocative title by converting a subject most people avoid into a concrete program of action. It is less a meditation on mortality than an operations manual for responsible living, and its strongest contribution to the literature of aging is the insistence that preparation itself can express love.